It's just when you've had you've I don't know, you've exercised, you've done a workout, and your muscles ache a little bit, or you played golf. It's just the best.
Are you gonna have a post-Easter huge big bath?
Yeah, I'm gonna have a day's binge. I'm just gonna go in it for 24 hours. Lock the door. Leave me alone. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Golf Buddies Allowed, brought to you by the Golf Yourself Healthy podcast. Joined here, as ever, in the GBA format by Jack McAuliffe. Jack, I think the listener firstly needs to know a little bit more about that drink you were just downing.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
A friend made it for me, a friend who's been looking out for my health. And I think we've talked about this, but one of the things that kind of goes when you're struggling with life or whatever is your ability to make healthy choices as it relates to food and exercise. I think recently I've had a lot on my plate, literally and figuratively, and have just kind of just started ordering food and not cooking for myself and not having good stuff. And I have a good friend who's very passionate about doing that. And so they made me a beautiful lemonade drink, which I've now just had with apple cider vinegar. It's supposed to clean out the toxins, get you feeling better. So I'm mixing that with my normal toxins, and I think I should be all balanced out.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? Like, where do you stand on the whole, because I think you and I have talked before, just kind of off air, but also quite openly with the listener. The pair of us, we've not, we've had our challenges to seek in terms of, addiction, for instance, right? And it always gets me to thinking about how, if I think over the years when I've been in sort of 12-step recovery meetings for alcohol, say, for instance, there's a very common trend or theme that comes up in the rooms, which is about people effectively saying that when they have discovered that they have one addiction and that they come into a recovery program to help them with that one, they then all of a sudden discover, or they have this kind of awakening moment where they're like, geez, I've got sort of, addictive tendencies in various other areas of my life. So do you subscribe to that? Do you think they're like kind of, do you believe in this idea of addictive personality or not?
I feel like, did you mention this on a podcast earlier on where I think we had a similar conversation and you shared that, I guess, recent research has shown that there's not actually such thing as an addictive
That's right.
Great, right?
Yeah.
So,
despite that, I can't help myself but continuing to say that expression because it's so popularly used, and people use it as like a throwaway comment, like, oh, you've got an addictive personality. I even said it in the episode with John. You might have heard me say. Yeah.
I think to me, it's a little bit of semantics, because I think when they say it's not a personality trait, okay, it's not something that's actually a part of your personality that they can measure and test and understand what that is. But as somebody who's in that mindset, I know what it means, and you may not be able to describe it or categorize it as a medical professional. But I think at the end of the day, you're just looking for something to make you feel better, right? And whatever that is. And if it's not one thing, then it's going to be the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I think the important thing is to find the healthy habits that you can get addicted to and resonate with you to kind of break that. Or I guess you don't really break that, you just repurpose it, I would put it.
Yeah, definitely. But how curious is it that, because like you say, we were speaking just the other day about how, and we're both addressing it now, that I think we're both, fair to say, living through a bit of a moment in our lives at the moment where, in your case, if I'm hearing you right, you're kind of like under the pump a little bit with, really trying to grow your business, for instance, and keeping busy with that. In my case, I'm just, and this is what I was talking about in that article I released yesterday on the Substack, so you can get that in the show notes if you want to have a read of it, folks, is kind of just addressing the fact that, like, it's so common for people to have side hustles these days, like GYH kind of is to me at the moment. But actually, when you're what I'm experiencing at the moment is trying to do it. It in the last few weeks, especially, I think it's become quite hard actually, just to not make the time for it, because I find that relatively easy to do, essentially, because I love it. But it's more the point that, like, where I'm going with this is my day job is all consuming at the moment. And then you layer on top of that, I've got a daughter who, let's face it, it's mostly Kim that kind of is with her and around her most of the day. So I'm almost feeling a bit guilty that I'm almost not showing up as much as I could for her, or not spending as much time with her as I want to. And then also I'm starting to feel guilty about, I'm letting my, not so much letting my standards slip with GYH, but it's a challenge at the moment to keep all the plates spinning. And it leads me up to the crescendo of all of this, which brings us back to where we started in this conversation, which is about when you're going through times of stress, tends to be those times where the healthy habits fall by the wayside, right? Because you just go to like the lowest common denominator of like the amount of carbs and bread related items that I eat at the moment is just ludicrous, and I don't know. I find it difficult to create I know within my heart of hearts and in my head, I'm like, this is just stupid. Like, I've been dropping in all the references to James Clear recently in Atomic Habits. There was I was saying to a colleague the other day, Jack, like I was in London for work, and a few of us went out for lunch, and we all queued up at this cafe, and I was looking at the board, and James Clear says to do this thing, like where you're about to make a bad choice or a bad decision, you kind of vocalize like what it will do to your waistline, for example, or like kind of, so I was like, yeah, so that one's got 1,000 calories in it. So what that means is blah, blah, blah. So I'll have the avocado and halloumi on toast instead, So it's just interesting, isn't it? How like in times of stress, like I haven't cracked the code yet to manage to, sort of, you can't, I think we're all human, aren't we? And we got to go easy on ourselves sometimes, but you can't have everything in perfect harmony, can you?
Certainly not. And I think that golf has always been, for me, and I'm sure for many others, yourself included, to a certain extent, a north star of a healthy habit that I can build other healthy
Yes.
habits around. And so, one thing that I like from James Clear is like, I'm not going to use the right terminology, but habit stacking, or basically having events that precipitate future good habits coming from them, right? So it's like, okay, I would like to get better at golf, therefore I need to eat healthy, therefore I need to take care of my body and work out, therefore I need to go to bed early, therefore I need to wake up early. It just kind of cascades into all this different stuff, right? Because now you have a sense of purpose. And I think that, going back to the addiction thing, not necessarily feeling that sense of purpose is where you gravitate towards, okay, what's going to make me feel better in this moment versus what's kind of the long term goal here. And it's crazy. Just to give you an example of it, the silliest little thing is at night when I'm trying to find something to watch on TV with all the different streaming options. The amount of overwhelmed that I feel trying to choose something and like getting stressed out and not being able to pick that, it's because I can't focus on it. Like my mind's going a million different directions and I can't focus. Now, yesterday, when I went to go practice golf, I've been working on my tempo in my putting stroke. I realized a very poor tempo in my putting stroke. So one of my coaches said, get a metronome and you can listen to a metronome while you putt. So got the metronome on my headphones, whatever, and I putt for an hour and a half, like the same putt with a metronome in my head. Like there's no entertainment there. So it's like I'm overwhelmed by the entertainment choices because it's like too much in that sense. But when you're on a golf course, because you have a singular focus, you're able to kind of drown all the rest of that stuff out. And that's, to me, why it's always been a place of peace that allows me to kind of recenter and get back to where I need to be. So that's why I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just on that, I think I briefly mentioned this to you already, but not to the listener. So I had the pleasure the other week of taking a friend of mine, Ollie, out on the golf course, my local 9-hole course. And, as I've maybe shared before, the challenge that I have found over the recent years of living in this part of the UK in rural Wales is that the minute that my wife and I moved into this village, we lowered the average age by about 30 years, because it's a very older demographic. So it's not until you have children that you all of a sudden get to meet, you go along to, childbirth classes and things like that. And then you all of a sudden they're there. Like, so the answer is, if you want to make friends in an older demographic area, just have a kid, and then all of a sudden it's a hard way of making friends, but it's effective. So anyway, like, obviously I talk about GYH at any given opportunity I can these days. And with him, so he, and I'm sure he won't mind me sharing this, because it was just it was really nice to see how much he got out of playing golf the other week. Like, he grew up playing it, he played it, quite a prestigious, like, growing up, he's probably ages of me. He's probably in his mid-30s now, but when he was younger, he grew up in and around Liverpool and played at quite a prestigious golf club, which I'm not going to name drop here. I wouldn't dream of doing that. But, he shared with me how he's almost got like mental scars of when he was ridiculed for playing with, because he had cheap equipment and stuff and cheap golf shoes, or he played with a Strixon ball when others were playing with a Titleist and stuff, and just dwelling on that's just, it saddens me to hear that like there's probably still elements of that kind of mentality prevailing in corners of golf these days. But I think nonetheless, because I've been banging on about how good golf is for you, and we've been talking for a while about getting out in the course and watching him go out there, watching him. So I can't remember if I told you how, we rocked up at the first tee, and it's like an honesty box system there. So like, you pitch up and people will go out whenever. And there's this guy with his not young son, like, maybe like late teens or something like that, like dad and son going out after work or whatever. And they saw us coming on the first tee, and they're like, do you guys want to go ahead? And that was the worst thing you could have said to Ollie, because I was hoping that they would go, So it just, how we've talked before about how that imposter syndrome thing kicks in, and like the nerves and things that golf does to you. But, I think, again, like, I believe when we talk about embrace the rough, we talk about adversity here. That is just, for me, one of the perfect demonstrations of where golf is good for you, because it forces you out of your comfort zone. It makes you do things you're not comfortable with, and you learn from it. It's character building, right? But
I think 100%, and it is. So that story of him getting ridiculed at that club, yeah, it's frustrating, and it's also exciting, I think, to think about how passé that viewpoint is becoming, because I feel like I've been in country clubs before. I've been in environments like that ish. I don't think I've ever heard somebody make fun of somebody's clubs. But, there's certain status elements. And I've also been in the most municipal, public, open access place. And I can tell without a shadow of a doubt, the place that I would rather be is in the open one, right? Where everyone's kind of welcome. Everybody feels a part of it. There's such a vibration and an energy in that environment that's so much more palpable and powerful than what you'd experience in that more exclusive environment. So I think it's, exciting that that's the trajectory. And you're right. I mean, what's interesting is the life lesson I think that you learn from going first in that tee and having to own that experience is, the reality is, his name was Ollie, right? Yeah. Ollie belongs on that tee box just as much as anybody else does. Literally, like, he owns that patch of grass that he's standing on. It doesn't matter if he swings and misses the ball. It's a duck hook, goes way right. It doesn't matter. He's perfectly allowed to be there, and he should be there. And I think that's like learning to embrace that and to feel that and to know that the golf course is your home, that it doesn't belong to anybody more than it belongs to you, and you don't own it more than anybody else, and having that feeling around it. That's a life lesson, because you should walk into rooms like that, right, with confidence and humility at the same time. So I'm sad that he still has the scars from it, but you're doing good work in helping to fix that and give him
Yeah.
these experiences.
I hope so, and yeah, I just reflected back on it afterwards. I mean, again, a couple of things, like he messaged me more or less the very next day and said, clearly he's got the bug. He's like, where can I go to buy new stuff? Like, and I'm like, yeah,
Addict.
my guy.
Behavior.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah. Do you know what? Actually, to that point, I was about to call you Ollie. One day, Jack, on this podcast, I think we need to run almost like not a well, yeah, maybe a segment, or just have a conversation about, is golf too addictive, or like where do we stand on, like, no, he's answered it already.
That's yeah, we're not going to touch that one.
Yeah, okay, we'll leave that for another day. But yeah, he's totally reeled in and he's hooked, and
Awesome.
but also, like you were saying there, I think where it gives me a certain pride or joy is the thought of, I do what I do at GYH partly to inspire people and to make them feel welcome and belonging and included in golf. And I honestly feel that one of the, because again, we always learn by our own lived experiences. And I, like him, have got my own sort of battle scars or mental scars from, turning up one of my first ever rounds of golf with my dad, and we were sharing a set of golf clubs, and the head greenkeeper came around and absolutely, went berserk at us, and kind of like, I parked my golf cart, or my sort of like push trolley on a green, and this old guy came over to me. He was like, "What do you think you're doing?" So it's like there's so many rules and there's so much etiquette, and I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a way of being a supportive friend, but also like you can introduce people. Like, I think it's important to still like know and understand the rules and the etiquette and stuff, but don't be an a-hole about the whole thing, and just like, again, just be courteous almost, and sort of like yeah. So that was that. Actually, yeah, so this week I've also been working at, there's what's called a Wellbeing work hub about 20 minutes drive from my house in park called Park Brinbach, which is essentially it's a facility. It's like a park which is kind of like built around the perimeter of a lake, and it had a lot of government funding locally here a few years ago, and it's got like a kids play area, like kids climbing frame, and it's got like a cafe, it's got all sorts of like water sport activities and stuff, but it's got a golf driving range, and it's a very humble, modest kind of place. And but this Wellbeing work hub is really, really nice, because again, they've invested a bit of money, especially I think in response to COVID, when like people were I think coming out of COVID, with the rise in people working from home. So I go there and it's free to use, it's air conditioned, it's got free Wi-Fi and stuff. And a lot of other people work there kind of remotely. And I walked in there yesterday and this guy goes, "Have you got a golf podcast?" Yeah. And I was like, obviously I got my pen out ready to sign the autograph, but joking.
Who should I make
Yeah, exactly. And if I see you selling that on eBay afterwards, I'm going to be so but no, and the only reason he knew was because someone else that I've been speaking to who works there, who I've just been bending the ear off, and because I tell everyone about GYH who will listen. So she had then gone and told this guy, because she knew he was a golfer, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I give it a listen, I really like what you're doing, and yeah, did you know there's this golf sim up just up the road from here? Like, we should get together and watch the Masters up there sometime and stuff." And I'm just like, golf yourself healthy.
That's a beautiful thing.
It is, right?
It's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. And I think they don't call it word of mouth they call it word of mouth for a reason. Like, your job is to constantly, proselytize the brand to everybody else and like get the word out.
What now? I thought I had an expansive vocabulary, but
I don't even know if I used that word correctly. Proselytize.
What is it? Say proselytize.
Yeah, it's like be an advocate for, like, spread the good word.
Superb. Love that. That's getting used again.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, I think that's how all those connections happen. That's a beautiful in-person, real-world connection, and keep spreading one by one from there.
yeah, definitely. So Connor, if you're listening,
Yes.
thanks for thanks for offering to be my friend, be my golf friend, and go to a golf sim together. So, no, I'm looking forward to that. And sort of again, like it just I feel very blessed and grateful actually that at this point in my life, it just feels like things are happening at a certain point in time for a certain reason. And also, like you say, it pays to promote yourself and your brand. Because if I didn't, to your point, then I wouldn't have made that connection for myself, essentially. So yeah, make friends and build community and things. But I'm going to use this conversation I had with that guy as a segue into something else that I shared with you on Instagram the other day. So we'll chat about this, and then I think we'll get to the real meat in the sandwich, which that's what everyone's here for, Jack, is the preview of the third International Congress on Golf and Health. So we'll get to that shortly. But I sent you a reel on Instagram the other day, which was a conversation between an American PGA teaching pro called Christopher Smith and a Scottish teaching pro called Hugh Marr, in which basically Christopher Smith was lambasting and lamenting the rise of the golf influencer and how they've got zero street cred, they've got no idea what they're talking about, they're not experts, and blah 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 blah. I thought Hugh Marr, who, by the way, I really really like, I respect. Like he's got a few podcasts I've listened to before. Very well respected golf coach who's coached a lot of people on like the European tour and things. I thought he gave a slightly more measured response to it. I'm going to come to you first. Did you have a chance to watch that, and what did it make you think of?
Yes. When you said the names, it didn't ring a bell, but now that you mentioned the conversation, because I didn't know the two
Yeah,
individuals. But listen, I think that as somebody who's getting into coaching right now, like I'm starting to create a roster of people who I coach and work with, and I feel a huge amount of imposter syndrome. Why would you ever take a lesson from me? Like, I don't know, you
mm,
know? But I also realize that I've spent like 30 plus years of my life obsessing over the golf swing and getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different lessons from all these different teachers and understanding things. So if I don't feel like I know a lot, then I know a lot of other people who are doing this and saying it don't feel like that they know a lot. And I think we have to be careful, I suggest, of gatekeeping, people getting into the game and saying the only way that you're able to access instructional information is through your local PGA professional. You're not allowed to, be influenced by a social media person who's getting you excited about the game. That excitement is more important to me than initially the instruction, just getting that motivation to go from there. And then we should trust the consumer or the audience to be insightful enough to figure out what's good content and what's not good content, and who they should go to trust. I mean, I think that's kind of on us. It's a caveat emptor sort of situation out there. But I think a really good example of this, just to name drop one person in particular, is a guy named Jake Hutt, who he's a teacher. I've met him a couple times. He's a cool Instagram following. He's a part of the Drivebox mobile simulator company. Really, really smart guy, really passionate guy. Worked at Stanford with the golf team over there and kind of helped coach. But he does all of his instructional videos on Instagram, and he like puts them to music, like, and he basically sings songs about ground forces. You know what I mean? So he's a very interesting, like, new age slash also expert information. And I think people like that bring such value to the game because they make incredibly complex topics and stuff about the game, esoteric stuff of the game, accessible to a broader audience. So largely, I'm in favor of it, to be honest.
yeah, me too. And let me explain why. So something you said there, and I was kind of nodding, like the Churchill dog, like I like to say. So that won't mean anything to you, but there was a TV commercial over here in the UK some years ago where, like, I think it was The Voice is based on Winston Churchill, who was like the British Prime Minister many, many decades ago, right? What's that?
I said I know that much.
You know that much, right? And like he had a very proper sort of English, and it was this nodding dog. It's like the nodding dog that you put in the rear view mirror of your car. Like, so it's like nodding along like that, but like he would always be like, "Oh yes," So and like he just nods along like that. So anytime I do it, I'm like, yeah, I'm nodding like the Churchill dog. So and the reason for that is because I've spoken to you in this podcast, and by extension, therefore, I've addressed this to you, the listener, on a few occasions about how I enrolled in and completed the community golf instructor training program last year, which was the reason for that having been designed and rolled out was because there was a perceived lack of a workforce. There was a need to increase the size of the workforce of golf coaches or instructors or whatever you want to, instructors, right? Who could get more people into golf. Because I think the thought process was you can't just rely on the PGA teaching community because it's not big enough to almost realize and seize the opportunity that there is around growing the game of golf. Okay, and it being everyone's game, and all the science around health and well-being, etc., diversity and inclusion, etc., etc. However, for all the positive mood music and the banging of the drum and everything that went around, sort of all the kind of fanfare around all the governing bodies and the PGA getting behind this thing, something that it niggles on me slightly is the fact that, and it ties to this thing we're talking about, is the PGA are still, from what I can gather, quite protective about what that cohort of instructors can or can't do. So essentially, and I understand why. So effectively what they were so explicit about this in the training course. They basically said, this training course entitles you to effectively teach golf up to a certain limit. Okay, so effectively we'll give you the fundamentals to teach someone how to putt and how to chip. But the minute you cross over into the realms of trying to teach swing, you need to refer your students to the local PGA teaching pro. Mm-hmm. And the reason for this is because the PGA are understandably quite protective about their members, because they don't want them being done out of a job, essentially. And I think what ends up then happening is that then manifests in comments from the likes of Christopher Smith, where he's saying, unless you've got the badges, you ain't nobody, essentially. And I personally think that's a really dangerous mindset, because I think there are evidently many, many people out there, you included, who don't have the official badge, but you're qualified by experience. So what gives? Do you know what I mean? It's like, again, that's, for me, that's another one of those quite narrow-minded golf industry things.
It's such a great topic. The person who I respect most in the game is a PGA professional. And PGA professional, when I was growing up, meant something very different than I think what it does today. That would be something you'd advertise as part of your coaching package, is that you are a PGA professional. And I think that there's part of that heritage that I actually really enjoy, where it's like, to get into the game, we really want you safeguarded with the right hands and the best possible instruction. And I think that used to be a gold standard. Like I know the amount of work it takes to become a PGA professional, and it's not insignificant. It's a heavy, heavy load. But you also, just like in every industry, can see people who are PGA professionals who are not as into it as maybe they were when they first started. And there's no reason why some influencer golfer couldn't be a better fit as an instructor than that. I love the heritage and the history of a PGA professional. And I think the challenge is modernizing what that means in today's day and age, because there's a lot of what he says with, if you don't have the badges, you're not cutting it, that I somewhat agree with, to be honest, in the sense of like, I don't know how to teach correctly or properly. I only know kind of my style. Um, so I just think it's a very interesting discussion and something that we have to find a nice balance for in 2025 and moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. So I think, yes, on the one hand, I think we're saying here being a qualified golf instructor, a PGA qualified teaching pro, absolutely has their time and their place. And if you get a good one, they're worth every single penny that you pay for them. And I would vouch for that all day long. I think where the golf influencer comes, and again, what do we mean by golf influencer, right? So I've learned a lot on this in the last year or so of doing GYH. We were, dare I go here, like you and I were chatting the other week about like brain rot content, right? So there's like a lot of stuff out there which is just kind of like just slapstick, silly stuff, like kind of reels and memes about golf. You could argue they're golf influencers. But then you've got other golf influencers out there who are documenting themselves playing golf and having a good time. Now, I'm not sure, like, so again, we've got to segment and separate these people because I think they serve a purpose in this ecosystem as well. Because I think as much as, and where I have an issue with some of that content sometimes is it can, even for myself, like, so I struggle with putting content out of myself playing golf because it feels very vain and kind of egocentric. Okay. But actually, in fairness, there are people out there who will be doing it for the greater good because they do want to make content that's relatable. And if it wasn't relatable, then there wouldn't be this massive growth in YouTube golf.
Mhm.
Okay. But then I think where we're landing with this is all of these things can live in harmony if everyone just is clear around. I think as long as someone's not trying to be something that they're not, because going to the crux of this issue, I don't know about you, but I have, to be fair, and I would love to speak to Christopher Smith and say, who are you talking about? Give me examples. Like, he's never going to come on Instagram and name drop, but he must have seen examples of people where they're claiming to be experts in the short game or experts in driving or iron play who aren't qualified. I haven't seen that. Have you?
You haven't seen what? Sorry, you haven't seen people who are claiming.
I haven't. So he seems to be claiming that like there are people out there in social media, influencers as he's calling them, who are trying to teach people how to play golf, and they're not qualified to do so. The only content that I've seen in that arena are teaching pros, qualified people.
Yeah, I would say he may be conflating YouTube golf with instructional golf because
That's what I'm saying.
yeah,
Okay.
I
So
think,
it's almost like just make sure you get your facts straight first before you right. So
but to be a little bit fair to him, I think that it's not a wrong assumption to say that YouTube golf is teaching a lot of people how to play just by watching it, right? So like they're learning from it. They like so I think it's so easy to be a hater of this stuff, right? And that's my default stance.
and
It's
it
like,
comes across a little bit that way with him, if you
yeah,
know what I mean. I
yes.
think he just needs to open his mind to it slightly, is what I'm trying to say. Because
So
it serves a purpose.
of
And
course,
those people that you're referring to are not I haven't come across an example like Grant Horvat, for instance, isn't out there. He's not doing it to teach people how to play golf, is he? He's just
no,
doing it for the sake
yeah.
of like hitting the numbers. And anyway, sorry, I'm
But
interrupting.
I think sometimes he'll do a lesson, right? That will get
Mm.
filmed and like something that he's working on. I don't think it's a big deal. I think that is relatable content. And I think at the end of the day, to me, it boils down to like one single question on this topic, which is what is a better business strategy? Faking it until you make it, or not adapting and becoming extinct? So, in the sense of like the YouTube influencers, whoever who don't have the badges are quote unquote faking it till they make it. And the established PGA professionals are like, we don't like the changing landscape. We're not getting the same customers that we used to get to. We're not resonating with the audience. They're going elsewhere. Well, the responsibility is on you to kind of change your marketing strategy a little bit. You can't just sit behind the counter of the pro shop and expect people to walk up. If they're not walking up, you got to go figure it out. and while still being true to yourself, but adapt or die. That's really the nature of the beast here. So I always think fake it till you make it is better than just being like, we're not going to change. I think that's a poor business strategy.
And thank you for taking us there, because that is essentially where I almost wanted us to round out on this, because I think you've really hit it at the core there, which is, again, in the world of business today, and in this world of, like, social media, it has to be, whether you like social media or not, and I've openly said I'm not a massive fan of it, you have to use it for marketing purposes, because if you're not there, you're losing out.
Did you?
And I think,
Sorry.
no, go on.
I was just going to say, did you see? It might have only been on my algorithm, but there was this video this week of this former college football player, huge, jacked, strong guy, and his morning.
Yes, yes. Is
Okay.
this the one where the guy wakes up and he's got the mouth tape on and the nose tape? Yeah. Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Oh, I loved that so much,
And
because that's kind of me.
it's
I mean,
it's
other than the fact that I'm not ripped and jacked like he is, but
it's hilarious, and the amount of like people who were copying it and doing it, like making fun of him and doing their own thing. I mean, I laughed for like 2 hours watching that. And that's the epitome of brain rot content. But the point is, somebody was like, Saratoga, the blue bottle water company, like needs to capitalize on this. Everybody is talking about this video. The product is
yeah.
prominently featured. You got to be in there if you're going to take advantage of this moment. Like, you can't be the chief marketing officer of Saratoga and not do something in that moment.
It's 100%, and I love that example, because I think where I was going was that whole fake it until you make it thing, for me as a person and my value set, feels deeply uncomfortable, because I go back to what Hugh Marr said, is like, if part of my mission with Golf Yourself Healthy is for me personally and for this brand to be recognized as a leading voice on health and well-being in golf, I don't see myself there yet, although I've actually got social proof to show that I have got plenty to offer. But it's that shift of telling yourself that you're all that, in essence, like, and sort of like, stop being so like humble to a fault, and actually dial up more the confidence, right?
Sure.
Because yeah, you've got to strike the right balance, essentially, I think.
So again, I like to boil things down to a single question, if possible. Like, what is the absolute meat potatoes here? And I think for you, in that instance, what is more likely to happen? You acting inauthentically in a way that doesn't align with your values, so doing the bad side of fake it till you make it, or are you more likely to have elements of imposter syndrome and actually be an expert and a leading voice on a certain topic, but doubt yourself because you don't think that you're there yet, either though you're getting this wider recognition.
And so this, by the way, so this is the perfect segue to lead us into talking about the third International Congress on Golf and Health. So quite funny, because on the website, right?
That's kind of crazy.
It is, right? So the reason I did it in that voice is just because I think it's the most epic thing ever that it's called a Congress. It's
Sick.
literally like I'm turning up at the Houses of Parliament or the White House or something to, like, to talk about golf and health, you know?
White things only.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, but interestingly, on the website, it kind of, on the one, like, some of their marketing says Third International Congress on Golf and Health. And then in other places, it says the Third International Conference on Golf and Health. I'm going with Congress. I prefer Congress. It sounds a bit more, it just sounds a bit more big
Prestigious.
deal,
Yeah.
prestigious, right? So let me just, so we're recording this on Thursday, the 27th of March. I will be traveling up tomorrow, making my way up to, starting the journey towards Edinburgh, which is where this Congress is being hosted on Monday and Tuesday at the Royal College of Surgeons. And the website describes this event as a So the Golf and Health Conference focuses on maximising health benefits through the game of golf. Sessions will cover topics such as the impact of golf on well-being, the role of golf clubs as health-promoting facilities, and the concept of golf on prescription. That last one, is a really fascinating topic, which I should talk to you about sometime, because there were a few doctors in Scotland, especially, that were quite literally prescribing golf to patients. It sounds like that's going to come up on the agenda. Congress will also delve into key topics like injury prevention and management, adaptations for disabled golfers, nutrition, strength, conditioning, and insights tailored for female golfers. So I could go on. Monday has got a really cool agenda. I will be speaking alongside another guy called Ray Nyabola on Monday lunchtime. Our session is themed on why people play golf. So I think the idea is him and I will tell our respective stories and why we do what we do, why we play golf. And so I'm looking forward to that. In the evening, there's a dinner event where one of the guest speakers is Stephen Gallagher, fellow Scotsman, Ryder Cup winner. Fun fact, Jack, he was the last Scottish player to be picked on a Ryder Cup team until Bobby McIntyre was picked 2 years ago. Bobby McIntyre, who hates being called Bobby. He's only Bob or Robert. So if he's listening, he'll not be too happy about that, I'm sure. He probably isn't listening. He almost definitely isn't listening, but maybe one day. So anyway, anything stand out to you on this agenda, Jack, where you kind of go, I love the sound of that. I would love Chris to go to that session and come back to the podcast next week and give me a download.
Well, I forget the exact name, but there was something about women in golf. What was the official name of that one?
I think the point here is that there are several sessions themed or linked to women's golf. So you've got the female athlete key considerations, golf and performance, and the Ladies European Tour Performance Institute. Yeah, all sorts.
Interesting. Yeah, I just think the fact that it's the third Congress, right? Which, whenever you say Congress, usually it's like, oh, this is the 133rd Congress. Congress is like, we've been around. And so overall, it's very cool that you're at the front lines of a conversation that is just bubbling to the surface, both in terms of what you do with GYH and actually physically being there. So I think all of those sessions provide tremendous insight into what's going on. I've gotten so much value in going to like the merchandising shows and the fashion stuff for golf to kind of see the conversations that are happening there and talk to people on the floor about that sort of stuff. And I just asked about the women's side of the game because I think for women and juniors, that's the biggest growth area of the game right now. And when you talk about that experience that Ollie had, being made fun of, for his inferior equipment, the feelings that women feel when they come to the golf course for the first time and are looked at a certain way and treated a certain way, and the feelings that a kid has when they get to a course for the first time and it feels stuffy, and the rules and the etiquette and different stuff like that. I think it's always interesting to get the perspective on how they're able to use golf to make themselves healthy, given that kind of challenging environment to step into.
Yeah, and so with that in mind, I'll certainly make a point of listening in closely to any, sound bites or interesting insights that relate to that, because I can bring it back to you next week and share it with you, which might be of practical benefit, hopefully, to your work. If you're listening to this, any of you, then do take a look at the schedule, the agenda for the Congress. Like I say, this is being recorded on Thursday, 27th of March. I'm hoping we can get this released pretty quickly, tomorrow or Saturday, so that you have a chance to listen ahead of the conference, or the Congress, sorry. And let me know if there's anything on the schedule, any sessions, any people you'd love me to talk to or find out more for you on your behalf. Yeah, I think one person that I'm really looking forward to meeting in person, who I've had a couple of calls with in recent weeks, has been a guy called Aston Ward. So he's speaking at 9:30 on Monday morning about his session is entitled "What Messages Resonate in Promoting Golf and Health." And so Aston is the chief operating officer at an organization Jack called the CPG, the Confederation of Professional Golfers. So it effectively is, it used to be part of the PGA, but it's kind of been kind of ring fenced off now. And it's essentially the learning and development arm of the PGA. Like, so basically for PGA professionals, teaching pros and members, it's the body who put on like seminars, webinars, sort of CPD stuff for pros. And what I'm hoping Aston's session might touch on is kind of what we've just been talking about here to a degree, or just the section before what we're talking about now, which is, you know, how is the industry, how is the profession of golf peppering in language and narrative around golf, around health and well-being to promote the game? Because I just think there are things that I'm observing are that, you know, again, golf lives in a bit of an echo chamber. The industry talks about itself and about the game in a certain way. And I just don't personally feel like we're seeing health and well-being being peppered into that narrative around golf as much as it could be, in the interests of, like, again, making golf coaches very people-centered coaches, if you know what I mean, rather than just being nerds about the golf swing, essentially trying to make golf robots, right? If you get what I'm trying to say. So that'll be interesting. And look, I mean, I just feel very honored that I've even been invited by Professor Andrew Murray. This very much is the who's who of the leading scientists, researchers, academics around this subject. And I can't wait. So I hope that you and I can get on here again next week, and I can just unload all the takeaways. So yeah.
Sounds like a fabulous opportunity. Really great networking for you as well to meet a bunch of people who are in a similar industry, right? And learn a lot from them. So I'm excited for you. I know what that feels like to be in that environment, you know, where you're just like everything that's going on, you're pumped about because it's all the stuff that you're passionate about.
Definitely.
So I think that'll be
Yeah.
a very cool experience for you.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So thank you for that, and look forward to catching up on it next week. I think we can probably come up the 18th, get ourselves ready to come into the clubhouse for a spot of whatever, cake, lunch, dinner. Probably not cake. There's been too much of that lately. But before we put out and walk into the clubhouse, I just want to ask you: are you observing Lent this year?
I'm observing it and then I'm looking at it and I'm not like I always just it sounds awful to say, but it slips my mind and I just get, you know, unfocused on it. But I have an app that keeps me up to date and tells me how I'm not paying attention to it as closely as I should. So,
Well, I've given up something for Lent this year. And again, I've given it up in the interests of my health and well-being. And what I've given up is taking a bath. Now, I am still involved in personal hygiene. I should add, I do still shower, just to be clear. So it's not like I've given up self-care and personal hygiene for Lent. But my theory and thought process, which I think is helping, by the way, although the data will confirm at the end of Lent, is two things. I mean, one, I spend my life in the bath anyway. I just love it. I love just swishing around in a pit of my own filth, basically. And I'll probably edit that out. That's a bit too graphic. But no, I do just love the bath. I spend as much time in there as I can. It's one of the most relaxing things I can do. However, talking about unhealthy habits, I've developed in recent times a very unhealthy habit of taking my phone in there. So, you know, I'm literally in there on the phone, and it's not a mindful activity. I might as well not bother. So there's a screen time thing here, right? So by not being in the bath, my screen time will go down because you're not taking your phone in the shower, are you?
no.
Let's be. Or if you are, that's just stupidity of the highest order. You better have a good insurance policy. But the second one is my heating bill as well. So I'm looking after not only my mental well-being, but also my financial well-being in the
Nice.
process as
Do you
well. So,
miss,
huh?
do you miss your baths?
Yeah, I do a
Yeah.
lot. I really do. I really, really do. Kim actually asked me, she said, is there a bath in this Airbnb that we're staying in? I was like, yeah, but it doesn't matter for me. It's like, it's a moot point for me.
Are you going to
If you
have
know, because I'm,
a post-Easter huge big bath?
yeah, I'm gonna have a day's binge. I'm just gonna go in it for 24 hours. Lock the door.
So
Leave me alone.
it's so interesting. I have friends who take baths. I don't take baths at all. I'm just strictly a shower guy, and I feel like it's like
Any
American.
particular reason?
I just think it's kind of the culture that I grew up with. Like I took baths as like a baby, but never like beyond that. And it's just so funny to think about just like lounging in there and hanging out.
Oh, it's just the best.
Sounds very luxurious.
It really, really is. Like it just, again, it's quite addictive in its own way, but it's, as we say in Scotland, just canny beat it. You canny beat it. It's just when you've had you've I don't know, you've exercised, you've done a workout and your muscles ache a little bit, or you've played golf. It's just the best. So yeah, I think, and also like absence makes the heart grow fonder, doesn't it? Right, as they say. So I'll be reunited with the bath in a couple of weeks' time when Lent's over. But that's enough visualizing me in the bath, I think, for one podcast. And as ever, I implore you all to embrace the rough and to cherish the fairway. And until we speak again, to offer you a download on Congress. I've done it already. Embrace the rough, cherish the fairway. What an anticlimax. All the best, Jack. Bye.